Bold leaders, no buzzwords, no BS. This is Mastering Workplace Culture, real talk on crafting workplace cultures that deliver results. Each episode, we go beyond corporate speak and talk with leaders who've actually done it. Those who've faced breakdowns, made bold moves, and built organizations where respect and results carry equal weight. If you're ready to challenge assumptions, gain actionable inspiration from proven mentors, and build a workplace culture that actually works, this podcast is for you.
Hello and welcome to the Mastering Workplace Culture podcast. Mark Babbitt, my business colleague, and I are hosting and speaking with the delightful and brilliant Susan Thorn from beautiful Fresno, California. And Mark and I are in Colorado. But we're very excited to talk to Susan. She's got a very, let's call it influential role in a rather large healthcare organization. But let me give you her bio, do a nice official, she loves bios. So let me do her bio. Susan is a healthcare leader and registered nurse, focused on strengthening healthcare operations by designing systems that support people under real-world pressure, which in the nursing field in a major trauma hospital happens just about every minute. Her work sits at the intersection of occupational health and safety, industrial organizational engineering, and culture, where operational reliability and human sustainability meet. She's a passionate advocate for thousands of things, including the frontline healthcare worker. Every role matters, and every injury, near miss, or moment of strain tells her something important about how the system is functioning. She believes the people closest to the work hold the most valuable insight, and her leadership is grounded in listening to, learning from, and designing systems with those who deliver care every day. Susan, welcome.
Thank you so much, both of you.
We're thrilled to have you here, Susan. Let's jump right in. Chris, I'm going to go a little off script here just for a second because it occurred to me during the introduction. Susan, the first time you and I talked, it was right after the COVID pandemic broke. And you were up to your ears in crisis management, personnel management, morale issues, keeping people grounded after, 5 12-hour shifts in a row. And so I don't know what made me think of that, but boy, a lot's changed since then. But I remember how grounded you were even then about if we treat these people right, they'll hang in there. They'll keep working hard, and that's my job. So that's my first recollection of ever talking to you live.
Yes, exactly. It was. When I was looking this morning, I pulled out my book that you both had sent me, and it says, Susan, thank you for your unbridled passion for healthy work cultures. And I think today more than ever, I've never been as passionate about this work as I am today. So I appreciate you both.
Well, thank you. Tell us, when you first joined CMC, what was the culture like, and specifically, maybe what surprised you the most, and what element of the culture did you say, "Oh, we can hang our hat on that one. That I can leverage. That I want to keep."
When I came to Fresno, I was pleasantly surprised by what a family-based culture it was, whether it was the inpatient units or the outpatient ambulatory care clinics. There was just such a warmth and a commitment and a dedication that since living in the Valley, I have found exists from a general sense. Fresno doesn't always have the best reputation for that, but I will tell you at Community Health System that has reigned true throughout my time here, even in tough times.
And what surprised you most? What was like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into?
It's funny. When I one of the very first few days that I was here in 2017, there was a provider, a doctor that was well into his, this being almost 90 at that point in time, and I rode up in the elevator with him, and he asked me, "So, what are you doing here? Are you new? And what is your job?" And when I told him what my role was, he looked at me up and down and said, "Well, good luck. It's a big job." And since that time, him and I got to be very close. But um, it has always been a family culture here. And even when we've gone through our changes, just the same as, humans go through changes, good, bad, up, down. If you've got that culture that is built in that foundation, um, you get through it and come out stronger on the other end. To your question about COVID, it was challenging. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And in the moment, you just wonder how you're going to get through it. But when you have a good foundational culture, yeah, you get through it and you're stronger.
Well, let me add, I know that your CMC organization is one of the largest employers in the Valley, and it's kind of an insular valley. I mean, yes, it's the nation's farmland, I think, is one of the many kind of cool legends of the Central Valley in California. But your role has changed over the course of your 9 years there. So what did you start doing? And then how has it evolved into, in essence, you are in charge of 11,000 plus employees today?
I take care of the people who take care of the people. So when I started here at Community, I was a director for the outpatient ambulatory care settings. And then during COVID, when things really when they escalated, trying to figure out how are we as an organization going to manage at that time it was, I think, probably at 9,000, and now we're up to 11,500 plus. But how are we going to take care of these people who are just in the trenches day in and day out? And that's always been something that's been a passion of mine. I've shared this story before, but I once had a humble opportunity to speak to Peter Senge, and, told him my desire is to fix healthcare in California. And he laughed at me and told me, just listen, you go back and you take care of the people that are doing the work and let healthcare figure itself out. And so, ironically, through COVID, I found myself in that position that I'm just here to take care of those that are at the front lines.
Well, and one of the challenges that healthcare continues to have, but especially during the shutdowns, was staff. There were not enough nurses to cover the people that needed care. And so retaining staff, attracting staff, all of that could become all encompassing. Is that?
Yeah, staff burnout. Yep.
Oh boy. Yeah. So was that a great deal of your job during that shutdown?
Yes. And it actually, it still is a major part. It truly has evolved, and our organization is very similar to other organizations where all healthcare organizations are facing the same challenges right now with staffing, burnout, having the right sized resources to take care of the complexity of the problems, and including now, which has turned to workplace violence is a huge concern for healthcare individuals at the front lines.
Susan, when you first jumped into your current role, even though we understand it's changed a lot, but what were the core issues you wanted a values-based culture to address within your team? Among, you said you take care of the people who take care of the people. What needed to be fixed, and how did focusing on values help get that done?
Yeah, that's a very good question. When I came to the organization, they were transitioning some of the units. And so that sense of commitment, dedication, and culture for employees who have been together, some of them more than 20 years, found themselves going in different directions. Um, and that was the biggest challenge. I think one of the most important things when you find an organization where you have that culture, it's very close knit, and things are kind of in employees' minds seem like they're falling apart. When in actuality, you're building to help support future needs. Um, but the most important thing during that time would be that leaders need to listen first. And when we begin to listen to them and then rebuild together, um, that's where things need to start. They need to know that they're being listened to.
It almost seems as though there's one of the biggest parts of your role continues to be influencing senior leaders who may have, their pile of problems and challenges, and they may not see how important it is for them to be visible, consistent models of your desired culture. Have you stopped to think about the hours that you invest every week in doing that kind of coaching and development of those leaders?
Well, I will tell you again, it goes back to I feel privileged to have joined an organization where culture is a priority, um, especially now. We work daily on culture of safety for our staff, and that goes across the board. One of the things that we recently done, and I truly believe this is something that all organizations need to look at and see how would that fit for us? What would that look like? But our leaders who, in the past, especially during COVID, may have been offsite, have now gone back on site and are in the hospital, in the units, rounding with employees, and very, very visible. And because of that, I think there is a great understanding. When I speak to them, they already know these issues because they're in the units as well. So that's pretty rare.
It really is. Well, is there a clear understanding of how important it is to align people, plans, decisions, etc., to that desired values-based family community culture that you're trying to build? Is there, what hurdles exist today to get people to align? Because you can find brilliantly talented doctors, nurses, technicians who may not naturally be civil to others. They've grown up in an environment that maybe wasn't, a workplace that thought respect was important. So how do you do that alignment? And how do you get leaders to model that alignment and to coach that alignment? That's a big question.
Yeah, it's curious question, isn't it? And I think currently healthcare organizations are facing a lot of external forces and things that we really don't have any control over, but they absolutely have a direct impact on our daily operations. So, considering all of that and the resources that we do have available to us, how do we operationalize and engineer a system that can be somewhat insulated from the things that are going on in the outside? And that's super hard. I tend to think of it in terms of building bridges. You've got your foundation, and all of those things have got to come first and be hardwired and embedded into the daily work before you can put the deck on so that people can cross back and forth and do the work they need to do. But a big part of that is the maintenance part. And I know, like, for example, the San Francisco Bridge, they always are painting the bridge and maintaining the bridge. And the minute they get to one end of the bridge, they go back and they start all over again. And I think that transition, just as you cross the bridge and think that you're done. There's external forces, there's staffing, there's other things that have changed the trajectory, and you've got to go back and start all over again. And it really is a continual process that I think retention is huge, and retention in a culture of safety starts at that point where the employee gets hired. It's not when they get the units. It starts long before that. And joining an organization where you feel that right off the at the beginning, and your new employee physical and your orientation, those really set the tone for how dedicated and committed you're going to feel about the organization. So one of my roles is to, my department sees all those people, post hire offer, and ad orientation, and we're the first face that some of them see. And customer service for my employees and my staff really is number one. We want them to have that red carpet experience and walk away from their post hire physical, and not even having a job yet, thinking to themselves, I need to be there at that organization, and that's my job.
Susan, I love that. I love the focus on red carpet service for employees, for caretakers, for service providers first. And I know it's not a new theme. It's been around, since the 80s, I believe. But in healthcare, especially, and Chris, you already alluded to this, there can be in healthcare service providers, hospital administrators, focused almost exclusively on results and the bottom line, and other caretakers who don't believe that red carpet service should apply to everybody. They're the doctor.
Yeah.
I'm the director. And how do you, in your role, convince people with those healthcare-sized egos that the way they come across every day in every interaction matters? And what do you do when they don't believe that? What works when you're trying to convince somebody how important that is, and what doesn't work?
Yeah, it's interesting. You can't. It's all about relationships, and combining the people that are doing the work and the work that needs to be done. And you can't fix relationship problems by fixing that person. I think you just have to, as an organization, we certainly set a standard of expectations for behavior. And I think as a whole, the people that work at the organization that I do, they are very happy to be here. They're very respectful. They really, at the heart of things, the patient is at the center. And I think if you don't have that culture, it makes the work you speak of very difficult. I've been at organizations where it's both, and yeah, it's that how do you fix a culture that doesn't hold those values to be true? I don't know that I know the answer to that.
No, I love it. Here's what I pulled from that answer. You said, and I'm paraphrasing now, to fix a culture problem, you can't fix that person. And that, Chris, I don't know if we've ever heard it put that way. And so what do you do, Susan, especially in healthcare, especially when a doctor is so hard to find, when a quality staff member from a performance point of view might be spectacular, but their bedside manner is absolute crap. You can't fix that. So what are the outcomes? What are the possible outcomes? And how do you steer a person toward an outcome where they're either more aligned with the culture that you're chartered with driving and sustaining, or just saying, you know what, this isn't working?
Yeah. So I think there's several different buckets to that, right? Sometimes we adopt a busload of people, and they aren't necessarily the people that we picked. And that is a different approach than being in a position where you can be proactive and hire for culture and skill set and then train to the role in the work. And I always hire for culture. I can train anybody on what needs to be done, but it's who you are as a person. And that has to happen over time. You have to, it takes patience, it takes diligence, it takes consistency, and it takes modeling by myself, you know.
And by all of your staff, as you say, you all on your team have such a, greater frequency of hours and time and investment at the early stages, including through the orientation. And what's interesting, I think about my wife and I have a gerontologist who has 2 young boys. She might be 40, and she's delightful, but she's very popular. So there's apparently a whole bunch of us old people that want to see her, right? So Diane had some skin cancer taken care of. This goes back to the years, boy, I met Diane in the late 70s, and she was a water safety instructor in Thousand Oaks, California. And she never wore a hat. She never did any skin protection. And here we are, 64, years later. So a doctor who is new to the practice was volunteered to come in and remove the stitches. And his bedside manner from a standpoint of the medical requirement to solve that presenting problem was fantastic. He was very quiet and he didn't engage with her. And she's looking at me because I'm kind of the translator. She's got dementia. So there's some layers you got to get through. And I thought,
yes,
it's not my job to teach this gentleman that you're not a gerontologist, but in this practice, you're going to see him. So I thought, how do you, again, you can't fix the person, but there needs to be coaching that happens, right? Mentoring that happens. I'll bet you guys in your role see the opportunity for some behavior change that could be tremendously beneficial for your desired culture, but it's not your job to fix it. So how does your team raise that red flag or yellow flag even? How do they respond to that?
One of the reasons I joined this organization is because we're in an academic setting. We partner with UC San Francisco, and we have the distinct honor of having residents and fellows that are here to learn their skill set and their life's work. And so as time has gone on since I've been here, we've had greater and greater opportunity to get in front of those new residents and fellows to talk to them about things like, de-escalation and workplace violence and some of the things that they're going to come across. And I do think just having those conversations and acknowledging to them that your job is going to be difficult and we're here to support you. Here's your resources. So again, it's a collaboration together, coordinated relationship instead of, an us and them. I do think that as time goes on, we are getting beyond that us and them. It's administration and clinical, and we are all one big team. As long as you've got that and people feel heard, number one, respected, heard, and safe. That's a big area now, is that psychological safety to come in with everything that's going on in the world. And we want them to come in with all 10 fingers and 10 toes. And at the end of the day, they go home with the same 10 fingers and 10 toes.
Susan, you mentioned briefly that a values-based culture has a special place for you when hiring, and I assume when onboarding. Does it help you when trying? You're competing with urgent care centers and neighboring hospitals and doctors' offices, pediatrician offices, cancer centers. When you're competing against all of those other medical institutions, does having a values-based culture help you attract and retain talent?
Mm, gosh, that's a good question. Probably something for someone far smarter than I, but I would like to think so. Um, I do believe that a lot of people that um, come here for that very reason, because it is very tumultuous right now. I will say, in terms of providers, there's newer models now where providers really are burning out on being out there on their own, taking care of the whole business and partnering with a hospital, one very similar to ours or such as ours, where we can take care of some of these things. We can support you. We can support you with staffing so that you can do what you went to school to do, and that's to be a doctor and not have to worry about all the other minutia out there. Um, I am proud to be a part of that.
Well, and I want to ask a question about the societal impact of workplace violence and the potential for aggressive folks in healthcare settings. What is interesting is that sometimes creating the safest environment for the providers looks like a very prison-like literal impediments to keep people from getting close to people, that kind of thing. Is that part of the kind of conscious thinking that you've got? Because I know that you could have folks that say, I can make our facility as safe as possible. No human can get in, but we can make it safe. And yet you have to create inviting, psychologically safe for 90% of the folks, of the customers that come in. And you want it that way for 100% of your staff. So how do you balance that?
I think the most important thing in that work really is having conversations, number one, having conversations with the people that are doing the work, understanding what it looks like at the bedside for them. Sometimes when I round, it's very surprising the things that I hear. But taking that experience and creating education and training for them so that they have an opportunity to act out scenarios or meet with their peers and just be free about that.
Susan, you know this about me, Chris. You know about in depth what happened to Deb and I at the end of last summer. We were at a terrible car accident, and I ended up spending a month in a Des Moines, Iowa hospital before I could even come home. And so, from a purely, can never turn my culture brain off. And I was amazed how many people, when they first get to know you, say it's a new nurse coming on shift, or the occupational therapist, or a doctor you haven't seen before. And of course, you're getting to know them, and everybody does the same, kind of the same inquiry to get to know you. But what do you do? So I explained what Chris and I do for a living, and universally, people would go, wow, we need that here. And at this point, I had experienced nothing but wonderful, empathetic, compassionate care that literally got me through a very tough time in Iowa, all by myself. Deb had already flown home. There was nobody there that I knew. It was a weird time for me. And what made it tolerable was not just the very high quality of care, but how people just love their jobs. And yet, to a person, they said, we don't have a defined culture here. We're kind of on our own. the culture is probably pretty good from a patient perspective. But if you had heard how the administrators talk to the insurance companies, and sometimes how the nurses talk to the doctors, and how sometimes the therapists talk to the MAs, then we need you here. And yet the care I received was nothing but amazing and personable. So maybe
Yeah.
you've experienced the same thing. You happen to be in an industry where people have to really love their jobs, or they wouldn't do it. They go do something easier, much easier. So what do you say to an administrator who might hear this podcast and go, wow, I'm glad my organization isn't like that. Just to have somebody tap on their shoulder and go, oh, yes, it is. You're damn lucky that people care about the patients and care about their work, love their work, or we would be in trouble. What would you say to that administrator?
I, like you, I know you're aware, both of you are aware that I spent some time on the inpatient side as well in the last 18 months. And I had the same experience that you did. The people that took care of me, everyone from the providers, residents, nurses, and even our EBS environmental services employees, they love their job. And I did my very best to fly under the radar when I was chatting with them because I really wanted to know what their experience was. I don't know what to tell that administrator. I, you know, you can look at the data all day long, and the data certainly is very, very important. That tells our story on how we're doing. But the other part of the story is the story that the frontline workers have to tell. And I had a really great experience last week. I rounded and I had a couple of externs with me from a local college and working on healthy workplaces as we went around. And I was surprised at how many people that I got to speak to at the front lines, everywhere from our materials management or EBS, and ask them, so what's the hardest part at your job? Or if there was one thing you could fix, what would that be? And I was surprised at how easy it was for them to talk to me. And I think in years past, it could have come across as very intimidating. But they felt safe enough to talk to me. And that absolutely speaks to the culture of an organization. So I would say to that administrator, how willing are your frontline staff to just sit and have a conversation with you and talk to you about what's good or what could be better, or because that speaks volumes of the culture. When people feel safe and listened to and heard, they will speak up.
Well, the thing that we all three of us have learned is that employees get opinions and they get reinforced with the experiences they have. And the other piece that's interesting is that I know that community medical has satellite offices and clinics and whatnot. Now, you described a lot of people came back in to the main hospital, but even within a single building, you can have very different subcultures driven by the leaders of those departments.
Yep.
And sometimes those departments can have a terrific culture that you'd love to infect the whole rest of the hospital with, right? And others that are just a little bit too, maybe it's distant, maybe it's just about the results. And so you can have 50 subcultures. Have you seen that in your years at community?
Yeah, I've seen it in every organization I've been at, trying to bring everybody together so that we're all moving in the same direction on the deck of that bridge. We're all going north right now. And assuring that, everyone has received the right communication about what is the mapping of our journey, where are we going, what's the plan for getting there, how long is it going to take. Those are the things that are important for a leader to create And, right now I that happens very well in my organization, and it does trickle down. It all comes from the top, how things are going. And for my team as well, that's my job as a leader, is to make sure. And some days I'm better at it than others. I'm not always great at it, but remembering to communicate, ask questions, help them to feel safe, and find out what. Chris, one of the things that you always say, or I've heard you say so many times, what have I forgotten? And I that has resonated with me, and I always try to remember to ask, what what else do I need to know? What have I forgotten? What have I missed? And I think that is critical in creating a culture of safety where you feel empowered and heard.
Susan, you obviously live and breathe your passion for culture, but at one time you were a registered nurse, and my sister, as you know, just retired, 45 years as a registered nurse, a
Yeah.
service provider that entire time, and a patient advocate that entire time. But she never had the
Mhm.
opportunity that you did, or never took the opportunity you have to do something more. So my question for you is, how did you go from focusing on medical based process, including patient care, to caring so much about culture and having that be your focus as a professional?
I think that culture isn't something I planned to enter into. Um, but I think it just organically happened. Um, I remember when I was most recently at the bedside, or when I left bedside and made the transition to go on the other side. Um, it was because I had a realization. I've always had some really great leaders, and occasionally the 80-20 rule, or maybe 85-15. I've had a not so good leader, and Kristen and I have talked about those not so good leaders. But I always thought that if I'm at the bedside, I can take care of one person at a time. But I absolutely have an engineering brain. So if I can go to the administrative side, I can help build a system that will better care for that person, that's taking care of the person at the bedside. And I don't know. I've It's been a while since I've been at the bedside, a minute there, but I don't know that I always felt supported in that sense at the bedside. I remember being a bedside nurse, and when they would come to you with the data or the finances and those components, I would say, "Don't talk to me about that. I'm here to take care of the patient." So I think that when leadership can talk about those things that absolutely they drive business, they keep the lights on, you have to think about that. But how you approach that and work with the person at the bedside and making that happen is a part of the culture.
Boy, it really is. And I remember back to um, the 2008, 2009 recession, but even better, and I don't know if better is the right word, post 9/11 and the impact on businesses back then. And the company I was working for back then, um, our business was training leaders around the globe. And so we had facilitators that would travel. We would train internal companies, leadership specialists to deliver programs. And that disappeared in a day. It disappeared in a
Yeah.
day. And one of the things that I remember most was, because I've got a consultant brain, so does Mark and so do you, Susan. But you can think about, God, we could save, 100,000 a year if we did X. And leadership at that company opened up. We need all your suggestions. How do we save money? How do we retain people? How do we do things much, 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 much differently? Because the revenue is going to be pretty different for maybe 4, 5, 6 years. And people came back with tremendous suggestions, some very simple, but all of them led to, I think in the first year, they saved $250,000. And of course, then the consultant brain in my head said, well, why didn't you ask us before? But it took that experience and literally the shock of an experience like that. But I want to transition here as we move up onto our time commitment. One of the things that I heard you talking about was with the interns/externs, I think you said, doing projects and going out and learning from frontline staff who have opinions, who have ideas, who have observations. So what are the most gratifying projects you've been working on in the recent past year or two at Community that positively impacted the people who take care of the people?
I think one of the things that is most important, you know, in my career, there's always been, things happen and it happens, and you report the data out on it and that it happened, but what do you do about it? It's not just reporting the data, but how do you take that data and make fractional improvements that might seem very little, but over time, those fractional improvements create a culture of safety. There's an event that happens, an incident. We encourage as leaders for people to report things so we can do something about it. But quite often, the reality is that person that reported that incident out of concern never hears back about, well, what happened that I reported it? What did they do about it? And I think that feedback loop is one of the most critical areas in creating a culture of safety, respect, and it translates into so many areas. It affects how many injuries you have on the job. It affects retention. It affects employee engagement. That feedback loop on things that are important to that employee that's such a large part of the work.
Susan, you used the term a couple times during our conversation, engineering, and in one time you used the phrase workplace engineering. And first of all, as a recovering engineer myself, love that phrase. Chris and I talk about workplace design all the time, but it seems to me like workplace engineering takes design to a whole nother level. It becomes systemic, right? The smiles we give each other, the respect that we give each other. Even if we just heard an administrator in a knockdown drag out with a insurance company, right? I mean, in all of our conversations between you and me and Chris, you've always talked about the respect people are shown within your industry when given the opportunity, when earned. And how do you make that part of your engineering? How do you engineer personal respect?
I immediately go back to many, many years ago. I had the privilege and the honor of having a personal communications coach. And we talked about my approach in my quality improvement or culture work. And one of the things that happened was in a rollout of a project that I did. I didn't do a very good job of communicating to anyone about where we're going, what's the roadmap, how long is it going to take, how are we going to get the luggage on the plane from California and all the people on the plane and all the food we need and all the coffee and all of those things all the way to New York City, all at the same time with the least amount of failures. And so when I explained my rollout process, what I did, the coach asked me, how would you feel if it got rolled out like that? And in my mind, I thought it was a really good idea. It was brilliant. I'm just going to make it happen. But when you forget to take the people with you by sharing with them, this is what's going to happen. This is forecast of what's to come. What resources do you think we need? And it has to be an engaging relationship, ongoing, where they feel safe to, even if it's to talk about what they might think is going to be a stupid idea and people are going to laugh. It's a culture. You guys have done it. You do the work. Those good things have to come first.
They do. And I'm reminded of a conversation we had recently, Susan, about there's always going to be people having bad days, and they may not come to the clarity that their bad days are making others have bad or worse days. And it's the idea of, so how do you minimize that? How do you make sure that everyone feels respected day to day? And I think that's the absolute root of the work that you're doing and the work that Mark and I do. And it's the challenge of, how do you get people to kindness may be a bit soft, but if we can talk about respect, then people can maybe make that connection that I can say this in 1,000 different ways. And maybe this or that is a better emphasis, so I don't ruin a relationship, burn a bridge, create an enemy. Because the likelihood is there's frustrations that others are having with the same practice or policy or player. So it's interesting because every day you have opportunities to help the people that serve the people get a little break, get a little validation. And it's making a huge difference. You couldn't keep 11,500 people in the business if they weren't feeling validated a lot of the time. So good for you.
It's fun stuff.
Well, it is. And let's, if we can, take a few minutes as promised. What are the things that you do away from the office, away from the workplace, to kind of recharge your batteries, recharge your spirit, renew your kind of optimism for this life that each of us leads?
Very good question. I think about workplace engineering. I'm teasing. I love to travel. I think that personal accountability, personal health and wellness, all of those things have always been very important to me. I have a fitness background. Like I mentioned, I did have an injury about 1.5 years ago. So the last 2.5 years has been a lot of physical therapy and self-care work, nutrition. But I love to coach others and share it with others, and encourage and empower them. So I began writing. So I enjoy writing and hope that I can bring some of this knowledge out to others, but always happy to share.
Well, and you do a great job of it. You are very dedicated to improving others' kind of experience. And from the moment I met you years ago, that has been a huge passion of yours. And that's been delightful to observe and to even benefit from quite a bit with my own wife's journeys and mine along with her. So, Mark, what would you add, sir?
Well, let me throw this out there, Susan. Chris and I talk all the time about how leaders must be vulnerable to create a culture where eventually workplace respect is just as important as results. And if a leader isn't vulnerable enough to say at any one time, look, these are our values. Even I don't live up to these yet. I'm not there yet either, but we're going to grow together.
Yeah.
We're going to learn together. And if you don't mind me saying, you go past vulnerable all the way to giving. I mean, your social media posts, your LinkedIn, Facebook, your white papers, the thesis that you started, it was all about you giving of yourself. And I can't think of a better trait for a culture leader to have and to sustain. So I just want to thank you for that, because it's very unusual. And Chris and I are very, very good at what we do, and we could not teach that. No way.
Well, yes, you could. There's a word that I learned from in the last, I don't know, maybe a little over a year ago, compersion. And it's the act of having that compassion for another. It's about humanity, right? We're all humans, and this is a very human experience. But when I'm able to provide that compassion for another and see that it has added value to their day, I get back from that. And yeah, it's all about the human experience. We're only here for a very short time, so it goes fast.
It really does. Well, and this time together went fast. We so appreciate your willingness to engage with us and to give us some insights into the work you do and the impact you have in the Valley, and how dedicated you are to helping the people who serve the people feel respected and validated. It's terrific. Mark, what would you add, sir?
Nothing. I just thank you for joining us, Susan, and for our audience. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We're sure we will. You will, and look forward to future episodes. Chris, we're recording quite steadily right now on this brand new adventure of ours called the podcast, and we're releasing new episodes every Tuesday. So be sure and check us out.
We appreciate you listening, and Susan, we absolutely appreciate you.
And I appreciate you both, and I look forward to sharing.
Bye, folks.
Bye, everybody.
This has been Mastering Workplace Culture. No jargon, no corporate fairy tales, just leaders who show their scars and celebrate their wins. Do something with what you heard today. Subscribe, share, take action. Creating a culture that equally values respect and results is your responsibility. Go own it. When you're ready to make that happen, we're here to help. We'll catch you in the next episode of Mastering Workplace Culture.